Hey guys, welcome back to Youth. If we haven't met yet, my name is Bex, and I get to work on the youth team here at Trinity. So you'll often see me around in person on youth nights, but today I get to join you in your small groups as we continue through the story. Last week, we heard the pretty crazy story of Abraham being commanded by God to take his son Isaac to be sacrificed. Then, right at the last second, God tells Abraham not to harm his son and offers him a goat to sacrifice instead. It's a rather compelling story about trusting in God. You think your family has some crazy stories? This one takes the cake. And while that's plenty enough drama for one family, it doesn't end there. At this point, Isaac is grown up and married to Rebecca, and the story picks up on page 21. It says, Rebecca gave birth to twins. Esau, the elder brother, grew up to love the outdoors and hunting. He was his dad's favorite. Jacob, the younger brother, was quiet and stayed at home. He was clearly his mother's favorite. The two boys vied for the inheritance rights, and Jacob proved to be a master manipulator and schemer. Anyone know of a set of twins? Throw a hand up in your small group if yes. I've known a few, and without fail, there is always the who is older joke, where the twin who was born just a couple minutes earlier teases their sibling incessantly about being the oldest. And I'm sure for Esau and Jacob, it was no different. The thing is, in that time, being the firstborn was actually a huge deal. It meant that most of everything their father worked for in his life and would ultimately pass on would primarily go to the firstborn, who's the oldest, and in this case, that was Esau. Those couple of minutes difference at the very beginning of these twins' lives would ultimately set the stage for years of struggle in Jacob's life. I'm sure for Jacob, that must seem pretty unfair. Could you imagine the most important race of your life and it happens while being born? Not a lot of time to prepare. And then as you grow up, your dad favors your older brother your entire lives. Super unfair. I remember in high school, there was this one class where some friends were goofing off and the whole class was snickering and the teacher was getting frustrated, being completely unable to get the situation under control. One of the students in the midst of this ended up falling out of their desk, papers flying, and we all laughed. The thing is, my laugh is not like a regular laugh. It is loud. When I laugh in a Walmart, you can find me from multiple aisles over. Well, not only were the two problem students sent off to the principal's office, I was too. All of the students looked shocked, wondering why I was being sent off when I had nothing to do with it. And I tried to reason with the teacher, but no luck. That was unfair. God gave me this laugh that's louder than everyone else's, and now it's getting me sent to the principal's office. We all have a story like that of when something feels really unfair. Take a couple moments in your group and share a story of when something unfair happened to you or someone you know. As Jacob and Esau grew up, Jacob always envied his older brother, and as a result, he became deceitful and manipulative. The Bible mentions two significant moments in their lives where Jacob, with the aid of his mother, but more on that fun family dynamic another time, they trick Esau and Isaac the father. The first moment is tricking Esau into selling him his inheritance. Now, either Esau isn't the brightest guy, or maybe his arrogance blinds him a bit and he acts indifferent about his inheritance. But one day, he's really hungry, so he sells his rights of his inheritance to get this for a bowl of soup to Jacob. Oops would be an understatement. The second moment just adds insult to injury. Now that Jacob has the rights to Esau's inheritance, his greed, it doesn't stop there. He wants the greater blessing too. See, in those times, it was customary for the father to give a word of blessing to the oldest son. So, Jacob tricks their dad in his old age by passing himself off as Esau to him while he's practically blind because he's so old. So their dad falls for it and gives over the greater blessing to Jacob, believing he's Esau. This sets Esau over the edge, and he is filled with so much anger and rage that he decides he's going to kill Jacob. Their mother overhears how upset Esau is, tells Jacob, and Jacob runs away from home. Now, spoiler alert, a big part of this story is about reconciliation, which is another way of saying things being made right again. The importance of reconciling the past is that it allows healing for the present and hope for the future, something these two brothers desperately need. Jacob spends the next 20 years not speaking to or seeing Esau. Could you imagine that many years looking over your shoulder, wondering if one day your brother's going to come back? At this point in the story, Jacob has a family, wife, kids, probably a pet cat. If it's me, he has a dog. But the point is, he's not just thinking about himself anymore. He's thinking about the safety of his family now too. So Jacob decides to meet his brother again. Don't miss that. This is a big decision. Deciding to make right with things that we've done wrong in the past, it's hard. It requires humility and it takes a lot of courage. It means being real with ourselves and identifying what we've done wrong so we can make amends. It also means that we risk apologizing and not knowing how they'll respond or if they'll choose to forgive us. Have you ever been nervous to apologize to someone? So the first thing Jacob does is send word ahead to Esau about their meeting through some messengers. They come back and essentially they tell Jacob, yeah, Esau's on his way. And with 400 other guys. So Jacob is a little freaked out because he's assuming Esau's on his way with a small army, presumably to destroy him, his family, and all his people, and his cat, but he probably has a dog. I digress. Okay, but seriously, when someone is wronged, it doesn't always just affect that person. It can have a ripple effect of hurt through families and friendships. Something that happened to your grandparents may have affected your parents, and consequently, you and your brother or sister. But now, think about a moment when reconciliation has happened. Maybe your parents had a big fight, but they talked it out and apologized. Maybe a friend hurt you, and things were hard for a while, and not just for you guys, but for your whole friend group. Everyone feels like they have to pick sides, and it's this whole messy thing. But when you reconcile and come back to right relationship, there's healing that happens in that moment. Alan Patton, who was an author and activist, said, "It is not forgive and forget, as if nothing wrong had ever happened, but forgive and go forward, building on the mistakes of the past and the energy generated by reconciliation to create a new future." I love that quote. We all know it doesn't really make sense to forgive and forget. If I approach a dog too quickly and it startles him, the dog bites me, I'm not going to forgive the dog and then forget it bit me. I'm going to use this newfound information about the situation to prevent it from happening again. The point is, I allow the mistake of the past to inform my decisions for a better future. So Jacob finds out that Esau's on his way, and it's not looking so good. So he starts to send a bunch of gifts ahead of himself to appease Esau. Okay, hold up. You know when you have a big ask of your parents? Maybe you're hoping to have a couple people over to hang out. Maybe you want to borrow the car, or you're hoping for an extra hour or two playing Fortnite. Whatever it is, you do everything within your power to persuade your parents towards saying yes before you even ask the question. You're doing the dishes, making sure your homework is done, taking the garbage out, all without them asking. Surely they'll say yes. Look at everything you did for them. I mean, let's get real. Talking about it now, it's pretty clearly obvious your parents know what you're up to. We've all experienced the exact same thing. Maybe you have a game or something that your sibling wants. They suddenly start treating you just a little too nice. You might even start to be a little unnerved at how nice they're suddenly being, and you get suspicious. We all know when someone is trying to butter us up, and I guarantee it was no different with Esau when he started seeing these parades of gifts coming his way in the distance. Of course, the stakes were a little higher. This is where the story starts to turn. As Jacob and Esau come face to face, see what happens next on page 24. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. What? Jacob had just hurt Esau so much that Esau wanted to take his life, and here they are crying and hugging. That moment requires a massive change of heart in both brothers. What a beautiful picture of family reuniting and healing happening as a result of putting differences aside. The brothers soon part ways again, but from here, the future looks very different. Jacob no longer wonders about his brother holding a grudge, and not only is relationship restored between them, but Jacob's family now knows they're safe and they don't need to worry. Years prior to the story of Jacob and Esau, God made a promise to Isaac, their father. On page 15, it says this: "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." Then he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." God is promising that his descendants will be more numerous than the stars in the sky. But for this to come true for this family, God has to use either Esau or Jacob. And after all the wrong that Jacob has done in his life, God still chooses to use him to build a great nation. I'm sure we can all identify with Esau's side of the story. It's so easy to think of times when someone has caused us hurt, stole from us, or lied to us. And I don't know about you, but if I could be real for a minute, I really identify with Jacob's side of the story. It can be painful to think about, but I recall times when I've been manipulative, greedy, or acted, frankly, like a coward. And if I can be so bold, maybe you can too. What's so hope-filled about this story is how God doesn't see all the bad things we've done with our lives and decides we're useless or like we've lost our chance. He sees our weaknesses and shortcomings as an opportunity to display his grace and strength. Reconciliation is the main event in Jacob and Esau's story, and it's also the main event in the story of Jesus with us. We learned a few weeks back about God creating the world, and Jared unpacked our origin story. Part of that story was how we mess things up by disobeying God. At this point in the grand story of Jesus and the gospel, mankind needs reconciliation with him, and he does that through death on the cross. In 2 Corinthians, the writer Paul is talking about the new life that Jesus brings and says, all this comes from the God who settled the relationship between us and him, and then called us to settle our relationships with each other. God put the world square with himself through the Messiah, giving the world a fresh start by offering forgiveness of sins. See, when we come to reconciliation between each other, we're not just obeying God, but we're living out what it means to be a follower of Jesus. He made things right with us, so we're to go out and make things right with others. Now, I know this story is from a couple years ago. Okay, a couple thousand. But we're still learning what reconciliation looks like today. How different would our world be if we saw reconciliation between First Nations people and our government, or the LGBTQ community and our church, white people and Black people? And what about your story? Are there some things in the past that need reconciling? How different would your life look if you experienced healing from those situations and could look toward a more hope-filled future? The Bible tells us in Galatians 6 to never tire of doing good. And why? Because we know that reconciling the past brings healing to our present and hope for the future. So what would making things right look like for you with God? My youth pastor way back once told me that it doesn't matter how many steps you take away from God, it's never more than one step back. So my challenge for you is this. What's your one step? And it can be so small. Maybe it's a quick prayer in the morning or listening to worship music on your way to school. Maybe for you, you feel this sense in your gut that you want to take a bigger step, and it looks more like confessing something wrong that you've done or a bad habit you struggle with. Or maybe you've just got something really big weighing on your mind and you need someone that you can trust to help you work it out. That's what your small group leaders are there for. So don't be afraid to ask for help. We're here for you. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. We have a couple questions for you before you go, so spend a few more minutes in your small groups, and we'll see you again next week.